The gift of the ancestors. The village of Ondori lay nestled between rolling green hills and the winding waters of the silent river, a mystical water body that the elders believed carried the whispers of the ancestors. It was in this village, after many years of prayers, sacrifices, and silent tears, that Nia was finally blessed with a daughter. For over a decade, Nia had struggled with barrenness, her arms emptied despite her heart's longing. She had sought the wisdom of healers, offered gifts to the gods, and traveled to distant shrines, hoping for a miracle. But it was only when she knelt before the silent river, surrendering her pain to its ancient spirits, that she received an answer. And so, when her daughter Zilla was born under the glow of a full moon, she was not just a child, she was a gift from the ancestors. From the moment she could walk, Zilla carried a rare presence. Her eyes, dark as river stones, held a depth beyond her years. Her laughter echoed like the songs of the birds, and her spirit shone with wisdom that defied her age. The elders often whispered that she was touched by something divine, a child chosen for greatness. As Zilla grew, her brilliance became undeniable. By the time she was 5, she could recite ancient folktales with perfect memory, her words weaving magic into the air. She understood the language of plants, helping her mother prepare healing herbs for the sick. She spoke gently to animals, and they responded as if they knew her soul. The village adored her, and her mother, Nia, never let a day pass without giving thanks to the silent river. The path of privilege. When Zilla turned 10, Nia made a decision: her daughter would receive the best education in the land. She enrolled her in Mwanga Academy, an elite school known for producing the most brilliant minds in the kingdom. The school was a world of polished wooden floors, sprawling courtyards, and towering bookshelves filled with knowledge from across the lands. But while Zilla's intelligence was unquestionable, Nia knew that intelligence alone was not always enough. The world was built on favors, alliances, and unseen hands moving the tides of fate. And so, Nia did what she knew best: she used her gifts. At the end of each school term, she arrived at Mwanga Academy bearing offerings. The headmistress received rare bottles of fragrant oils. The teachers were gifted handcrafted robes and exotic spices. Even the caretakers found their hands filled with baskets of sweet fruits and dried meats. "Thank you for guiding my daughter so well," she would say, her voice warm and her eyes shining with sincerity. The teachers, touched by her generosity, watched over Zilla with favor. They ensured she was seated at the front of the class, that her name was whispered with admiration, that opportunities found their way to her doorstep. Zilla's rise. Zilla, in turn, did not disappoint. She soared through her studies, her name always at the top of the class list. She was not only brilliant but also kind-hearted, sharing her knowledge with her classmates, charming both teachers and students alike. By the time she turned 16, she was already a legend within the academy. Parents pointed at her during award ceremonies, whispering to their children, "Why can't you be like Zilla? Does she have 2 heads?" Yet, Zilla never saw herself as superior. In her heart, she believed her success was a blessing from the silent river, a divine gift that had to be honored with humility. But fate is never without its challenges. And unknown to Zilla, a storm was brewing. A storm in the form of a new student who would shake the very foundations of everything she had ever known. The arrival of the unseen rival. The start of a new term at Mwanga Academy always brought excitement. Students returned with renewed energy, eager to prove themselves, to outshine their peers, and to claim new achievements. But this time, the excitement carried a different weight, a whisper, a name on everyone's lips. Her name was Jora. From the moment she stepped through the grand iron gates of Mwanga Academy, the air seemed to shift. She was striking, yet unassuming, with skin the color of polished mahogany and eyes that held the depth of ancient wisdom. Her braided hair was adorned with tiny beads that clicked softly as she walked. But it was not her beauty that captured attention, it was the way she carried herself, with the quiet confidence of one who did not need validation. Jara's reputation arrived before she did. She solved the master's riddle on her first day, one student whispered. "I heard she can recite entire books from memory," murmured another. She finished an arithmetic test before the teacher finished explaining it. The unshakable one. Unlike many students at Mwanga, Jara came from humble roots. She was raised by her grandmother, Mama Esh, a revered elder known for her wisdom. From childhood, Jara had been taught a simple but powerful lesson. Never accept a gift you do not understand, and never allow anyone to shape your destiny but yourself. It was a lesson she lived by. While students at Mwanga Academy often exchange small gifts to gain favor, Jara accepted nothing from anyone. She paid for her own school supplies, she shared her knowledge freely without expecting praise, and most importantly, she never aligned herself with those who sought power through manipulation. This made her different. This made her dangerous. And Zila felt it. A challenge to the throne. At first, Zila watched Jara with curiosity. She wanted to know if the rumors were true. Then, the first test results were announced. Jara's name stood at the very top. Zila's had never been below second place before, but there it was, right beneath Jara's, a single mark behind. The school buzzed with whispers. Could Jara be the one to surpass Zila? Do you think she'll take the Best Student Award this year? Zila has ruled this school for too long, maybe it's time for a new star. Zila remained calm on the outside, but inside, a storm brewed. She had never been challenged before. Never felt the weight of uncertainty pressing against her. She had been untouchable. Until now. The gift that was rejected. One afternoon, Zila approached Jara under the shade of the large baobab tree where students often gathered to study. She held in her hands a beautifully woven scarf, deep blue with golden embroidery, a fabric so fine it could only have come from her mother's shop. "Jara," she said, her voice warm and inviting, "this is for you." A small welcome gift to Mwanga. Jara glanced at the scarf but did not reach for it. Her silence stretched between them, thick like the humid air before a storm. Then, with the gentlest shake of her head, she said, "Thank you, Zila, but I cannot accept this." Zila blinked, stunned. No one had ever refused a gift from her before. Not the students. Not the teachers. Not even the headmistress. You don't like it?" she asked, forcing a smile. Jara smiled back, but her eyes held something deeper. "It's not that. My grandmother always told me, gifts are never just gifts. They carry intentions. Some are good, some are bad, and some are unclear. So I only accept gifts from those I trust completely." For the first time, Zila felt a prickle of unease. Jara hadn't said it outright, but the message was clear, she did not trust Zila. A mother's warning. That evening, Zila returned home to find her mother waiting. Nia had heard the whispers, the murmurs of a new rival rising. She had seen the slight hesitation in her daughter's step, the way her hands gripped the hem of her dress too tightly. Zila sat beside her mother, her heart heavier than usual. "Mother, what if Jara takes my place?" she asked in a whisper. Nia smiled, but it was not the smile of comfort. It was the smile of someone who had seen the world's battles before. "No one," she said softly, running her fingers through Zila's braids, "can take what is destined to be yours. You have worked hard, and your path is already set." Then her voice dropped lower. "But if someone stands in your way, there are ways to make sure they do not stay there for long." Zila looked up at her mother, confusion flickering in her eyes. Nia simply smiled again. Outside, the silent river flowed calmly, its waters deep and endless, hiding the secrets it carried beneath its surface. Little did Zila know, her mother was about to call upon those secrets once more. The whispering shadows. The night was thick with silence, the kind that made the air feel heavier, charged with an unseen presence. The silent river flowed gently under the moon's silver glow, its surface smooth as polished glass. Shadows danced along the banks as Nia stood barefoot at the water's edge, a clay bowl of sacred water cradled in her hands. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Tonight, she would call upon the unseen forces once more. She dipped her fingers into the bowl and sprinkled droplets into the river, watching as they merged with the dark waters. Then, she began to chant. Her voice, low and rhythmic, merged with the whisper of the wind. The language she spoke was ancient, passed down through generations of those who knew how to bargain with spirits. Ngara, spirit of the silent river, keeper of secrets, guardian of fate. I call upon you. The air thickened. A cold breeze rippled across the water. Nia closed her eyes, allowing the river's energy to wrap around her, pulling her into a trance. She saw the spirit of Ngara, its form shifting like liquid silver, rising from the depths, a voice echoing in her mind. What do you seek, daughter of the waters? Nia's grip on the bowl tightened. There is a girl who stands in my daughter's path. She must forget. She must weaken. Her mind must lose its light. The spirit hummed, the sound vibrating deep in Nia's bones. Every action has a price, Nia. Do you offer what is required? Without hesitation, Nia pressed her thumb to her tongue and let a single drop of blood fall into the river. The water churned. The deal was sealed. The next morning, Jorah awoke with a heaviness she could not explain. The first signs. At Miwanga Academy, the day started as usual. The sun stretched its golden fingers across the grand school grounds, students bustled through the hallways, laughter and chatter filling the air. Jorah walked into class, her usual confidence in her stride. But as soon as she sat at her desk, something felt off. The teacher wrote a complex arithmetic equation on the board. Normally, Jorah would have had the answer before anyone else. But today, her mind was blank. She stared at the numbers, her vision blurring. What's happening? She squeezed her eyes shut, shook her head, tried again. Nothing. The numbers, once her closest friends, now felt like strangers. She reached for her pen, but her fingers trembled, barely able to hold it steady. A cold sweat formed at the back of her neck. And then, in the middle of the lesson, her eyelids grew heavy. The teacher's voice faded into a distant murmur. Her classmates' whispers melted into the background. Her body slumped, her head falling onto her desk. Jorah was asleep. When she woke, the class was staring at her. Some whispered behind cupped hands. The teacher frowned. Jorah, are you feeling well? The teacher asked. She nodded quickly, embarrassed. Why yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. But she knew something was wrong. And it was only the beginning. The shadows grew stronger. Day by day, the strange occurrences continued. She would wake exhausted, as if she had been running in her sleep. She forgot things, answers she once knew effortlessly. Her hands shook when she tried to write, the once steady grip of her pen slipping. She dozed off at odd moments, her mind heavy with an unseen weight. The students of Miwanga Academy began to whisper. Jorah is acting strange. Maybe she was never that smart to begin with. Looks like Zila is still the best after all. Bit by bit, the school's attention drifted away from Jorah and back to Zila. The teachers, once eager to praise Jorah's brilliance, now spoke only of Zila's unmatched intelligence. Zila watched as Jorah faded into the background, her heart swelling with relief. But deep inside, a seed of guilt threatened to take root. A grandmother's instinct. Far away, in a quiet hut at the edge of Ondori, Mama Esh stirred her herbal brew, her mind heavy with thoughts. She had sensed a disturbance in the air. She had seen it in her dreams, shadows creeping around Jorah, calling like serpents, whispering in voices too soft to hear. And now, the signs were clear. Someone had cast a spell on her granddaughter. She set down her wooden spoon and wiped her hands. There was no time to waste. She reached for her staff, the one carved from the sacred baobab tree, and stepped outside. The night air was thick, humming with unseen forces. Mama Esh raised her hands to the sky, her voice strong and commanding. Ancestors, I call upon you. Let the hidden be revealed. Let the darkness that lingers be burned away. Let no harm befall my blood. Let justice be done. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the village, rustling the trees, sending ripples across the silent river. And miles away, in her sleep, Nia shuddered. For the first time since she had made her deal, she felt fear. Something was coming. And it would not be merciful. The curse unraveled. Jorah's nights had become an endless loop of horror. Each time she closed her eyes, she found herself trapped in a vast, empty darkness, with only the sound of whispering voices circling around her like hungry spirits. Then, out of the shadows, figures emerged, faceless beings cloaked in mist, their eyes glowing like dying embers. They moved toward her in slow, deliberate steps, holding a black bowl filled with something thick and foul-smelling. A voice, deep and hollow, echoed through the void. Eat. Jorah tried to refuse, but her body did not listen. Her hands lifted on their own, accepting the bowl. The moment she took a bite, a strange heaviness settled over her, pressing down on her spirit. She could feel something being pulled out of her, something being taken, her strength, her light, her very essence. She wanted to scream, to run, to fight back. But she couldn't. She was too weak. Every night, the same nightmare. Every morning, she woke feeling emptier than before. Until one night, the darkness spoke a name. A name she had never heard before. Ngara. Jorah gasped awake, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing: this was no ordinary sickness. Something, or someone, had cursed her. A grandmother sight. At dawn, Jorah stumbled out of bed, her body feeling like it had been dragged through fire. Mama Esh, who had been watching her granddaughter in quiet concern, finally saw what she had been fearing all along. The signs were there, the paleness in her skin, the tremor in her fingers, the deep exhaustion in her eyes. But as Jorah stepped into the light of morning, Mama Esh saw beyond the physical. She saw the invisible chains. Dark, shadowy tendrils wrapped around Jorah's body, binding her, draining her, feeding off her. Esh inhaled sharply, her old hands clenching into fists. This was not a simple illness. This was the work of dark magic. And she knew exactly what needed to be done. The gathering of the elders. Mama Esh wasted no time. She sent messengers to the elders of Ondori, calling them to her home before the sun set. By evening, 5 of the most powerful spiritual leaders of the village had gathered, their faces carved with wisdom, their eyes sharp with understanding. A fire burned in the center of the hut, casting long shadows against the walls. Jorah sat in the middle, her body frail and trembling, barely able to keep her head up. Mama Esh stepped forward, lifting her carved staff high above her head. "My granddaughter has been touched by darkness," she said, her voice steady and strong. "We must break the chains that bind her, or she will be lost to the spirits that feast upon her soul." The elders nodded, each of them stepping closer, forming a protective circle around Jorah. One of them, an old man with deep scars across his arms, took a bowl of sacred white chalk and drew symbols around Jorah, each marking a barrier against the forces that tormented her. Another elder sprinkled crushed bitter kola and dried herbs into the fire, sending thick, fragrant smoke into the air, smoke meant to expose hidden spirits. Mama Esh placed her hand on Jara's head. And then, they began to pray. The battle for Jara saw. The chant started as a whisper, but soon, they grew in power, a rhythm of ancient words, a force stronger than the darkness. Jara shivered violently, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows around her began to move. The hut trembled. The fire crackled wildly, its flames twisting into unnatural shapes. The bitter smoke curled through the air, revealing the unseen. And then, a scream. Not from Jara, but from something inside her. Jara's body convulsed, her back arching, her fingers clawing at the air. Her lips moved, but the voice that came out was not her own. She belongs to me. The elders did not stop. Their voices rose, demanding the spirit to leave. Mama Esh pressed her palm firmly against Jara's forehead, her eyes blazing. You have no claim here. She is a child of the ancestors. I command you to release her. Jara gasped, her body jerking violently. Then, her stomach tightened. Something inside her pushed upward, clawing its way out. And then, she vomited. A thick, black substance spilled from her mouth onto the ground, its stench filling the room. The moment it touched the floor, it sizzled, hissing like a dying snake. Jara collapsed forward, gasping for air. The shadows around her began to fade. The curse had been broken. The return of strength. For a long time, Jara lay on the floor, her chest rising and falling as if she had just run a great distance. But for the first time in weeks, her body felt light. The chains that had bound her were gone. The weight that had pressed against her spirit had lifted. She looked up at her grandmother, eyes filled with grateful tears. Mama Esh smiled, touching her cheek gently. You are free now, child. Jara sat up, her limbs still weak, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. She knew who had done this to her. And she knew it was not over yet. Because the spirits of the ancestors had not just freed her. They had awakened. And the one who had cast the curse would soon face their wrath. The wrath of the river spirits. The night was unnaturally still. The air in Ondori carried a thick, suffocating silence, as if the entire land was holding its breath. Then, without warning, the skies rumbled, a deep, guttural sound that sent shivers through the village. The silent river, which had always been calm and unwavering, suddenly stirred. Ripples turned to waves. Waves turned to surging currents. The once glass-like surface of the sacred water boiled and churned, as if something deep within had awakened. And then, a voice. A deep, ancient voice rose from the river's depths, whispering in a language older than time itself. Nia, you have broken the covenant. The mother's fear. In her home, Nia jolted awake, her breath sharp, her heart pounding. Something was wrong. She sat up, clutching her chest as a sudden wave of heat coursed through her body. Her skin prickled as if unseen hands were grasping at her, pulling, burning. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. From the corner of the room, shadows slithered across the walls, twisting, shifting. They crawled toward her, stretching like blackened fingers. A cold, whispering wind filled the house, carrying voices that weren't her own. You called upon the river, yet you defied its will. Nia gasped, struggling to catch her breath. She had always believed she had control over the spirits. She had whispered her desires to them, traded favors in the dead of night. But she had made a terrible mistake. The spirits had blessed her daughter, had given Zilla favor and light. But they had never given permission to harm another child of destiny. And now, they had come to collect their price. The curse of betrayal. Zilla burst into the room, her eyes wide with terror. Mama, She cried, rushing to her mother's side. But the moment she touched her, she recoiled in horror. Nia's hands were burning. Not with fire, but with something far worse, a searing darkness that coiled around her fingers, her wrists, creeping up her arms like living snakes. Nia screamed, trying to shake off the shadows, but they only tightened, seeping into her skin. Her veins turned black, her body convulsing. Zilla staggered backward, her breath ragged. "Mama, what's happening?" Nia's eyes filled with fear, not for herself, but for her daughter. She knew what this meant. She had called upon Ngara, the spirit of the silent river. And now, Ngara had turned against her. "Zilla," Nia gasped, her voice shaking. "The spirits, they are punishing me." Tears burned in Zilla's eyes. "But why? You said they were on our side. You said." Nia looked at her daughter with a painful, broken expression. "I was wrong." And in that moment, Zilla understood. Her mother's gifts to the teachers, the whispers in the night, the way Jorah had changed so suddenly, it had never been luck, never been coincidence. Her mother had been manipulating fate. And now, fate was fighting back. A desperate plea. The wind outside howled, and the silent river raged. The villagers woke to the sight of the river rising unnaturally, spilling over its banks as if it were alive. Some said they saw figures within the waves, spirits shifting beneath the surface, their eyes glowing with vengeance. Zilla knew there was only one person who could help. She ran. Her feet pounded against the earth as she sprinted through the darkened village, ignoring the storm that churned around her. She reached Jorah's home, her chest heaving as she pounded on the door. The door swung open. Jorah stood there, her face calm, as if she had been waiting. Zilla fell to her knees, her pride shattered, her voice desperate. "Please," she sobbed. "Help me." Jorah's eyes were unreadable. She had suffered. She had nearly lost herself because of what Nia had done. And yet, here was Zilla, begging for mercy. For a long moment, Jorah said nothing. Then, she sighed. "The spirits do not take without reason," she said quietly. "Your mother stole from me. She tried to twist fate. And now, fate is taking its price." Zilla's heart clenched. "But she's my mother," she whispered. "I can't just watch her die." Jorah studied her, then tilted her head slightly. "There is only one way," she said. Zilla looked up at her, hope flickering in her eyes. "But," Jorah continued, her voice firm, "it will not come without a cost." Zilla swallowed hard. "Tell me what I need to do." Redemption and the fall of darkness. The storm raged on. The silent river, once calm and steady, surged with anger, its waves crashing against the banks like a beast unleashed. Ondori trembled beneath the wrath of the spirits, and the villagers gathered in fear, whispering prayers into the wind. At the center of it all, Nia writhed in pain, her body consumed by the shadows that crawled over her skin, a punishment for her betrayal. And yet, Jorah stood before her. She had every reason to walk away. To let Nia suffer, to let the river spirits take what they had claimed. But Jorah was not like Nia. She would not let hatred shape her fate. The final ritual. Under the stormy sky, Jorah turned to Mama Esh, whose eyes held a knowing sadness. The village elders stood in a circle, their staffs planted in the earth, their lips moving in hushed prayers. Jorah took a deep breath. She must be cleansed, she declared, her voice steady despite the turmoil around them. But the spirits will not let her go so easily. We must beg for her release. The elders nodded. The cleansing ritual would not be easy. A fire was lit, its golden light flickering against the darkness that threatened to consume Nia completely. Jorah knelt before the flames, lifting her hands to the heavens. The elders began their chants, voices rising and falling in perfect harmony. Great Spirit of the river, we call upon you. The balance was broken, but let it be restored. The debt was taken, but let mercy be given. If there is a path to redemption, show us the way. The wind howled in response. The ground beneath them shook, and the river roared louder, as if it was fighting the plea for mercy. But Jorah did not waver. She reached into a pouch tied at her waist and pulled out a bundle of sacred herbs, tossing them into the fire. A thick, white smoke rose into the air, spiraling toward the heavens. Then, with all the strength left in her, she stepped forward and placed her hand on Nia's forehead. Nia screamed. The shadows around her convulsed, writhing as if they were alive, struggling to cling to her soul. Jorah whispered a final command. Begone. The fire flared, and with a final, gut-wrenching shriek, the dark forces ripped away from Nia's body, vanishing into the night like mist in the wind. The storm stilled. The river, once raging, calmed, its surface smoothing into a tranquil mirror. And in that silence, the Spirit spoke. The price of betrayal. The wind carried their message, a voice low and ancient, echoing through the village. The river forgives, but it does not forget. The balance is restored, but the price remains. Nia, daughter of Ondori, you have broken the sacred trust. You have twisted fate for selfish gain. You will live, but never again will your feet touch the soil of this land. The words hung in the air like a decree written in stone. Nia collapsed, her body weak, her spirit hollowed. She had been spared, but she had lost everything. Her home. Her place in Ondori. Her right to stand beside her daughter. Tears streamed down Zila's face as she knelt beside her mother, grasping her hands. Mama, please, she sobbed. I don't want you to go. But Nia knew there was no other way. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She touched Zila's face gently, her voice barely above a whisper. I did this to you, she said. I thought I was protecting you, but I only brought you harm. She turned to Jorah, her once proud eyes now filled with shame. You should hate me, Nia said. And yet, you saved me. Why? Jorah's expression was unreadable. Because vengeance does not build anything, she said simply. Only justice does. Nia nodded slowly. She stood, her legs weak beneath her, and turned toward the riverbank. Without another word, she walked away, disappearing into the mist of the night. The village watched in solemn silence, knowing that she would never return. Zila's redemption. Days passed, and life in Ondori slowly returned to normal. But Zila was not the same. She no longer basked in praise. No longer sought the admiration of the school. Instead, she spent her days in quiet reflection, seeking out the village elders, listening to their wisdom. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, she found Jorah sitting by the silent river. She approached cautiously, then sank to her knees beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Zila whispered, I am sorry. Jorah turned to her, watching her carefully. I didn't know, Zila continued. I didn't know what my mother was doing. But I let it happen. I enjoyed the power. I was blind. She swallowed hard. How do I make it right? Jorah exhaled, turning back to the river. You already have, she said. You chose to stop. You chose to learn. Zila nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. She would never forget the lesson. A story that would never be forgotten. The tale of the silent river and the girl who defied fate became a lesson passed down through generations. Children grew up hearing of the dangers of greed, jealousy, and manipulating destiny. They learned that the spirits of the land did not punish without reason, but they did not grant power without consequence. And most of all, they learned that even in the face of darkness, redemption was always possible. As for Jorah, she became a legend in Ondori. Not because she was the most intelligent. Not because she had defeated dark magic. But because she had chosen mercy over vengeance. And that was a power greater than any spell. The end.